Welcome back to my studio. Today is day 2. We're going to finish up this piece, or pretty much finish up this piece. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to lay in almost identical to what we just did, but we're going to pop a little bit more. So the whites are going to be a little bit brighter, the dark's going to be a little bit darker, and we're going to throw in some more color. We're going to wash the color on here to bring that color out so it's not quite as faded as we have right now. So the first thing we want to do, let's start up in here again, we'll work our way back down, and let's grab some of that yellow ochre that's in here. We're going to wash over that, enrich that color up a little bit, and then pop some more of that whites. So let's go grab some of our color. Now when we're doing washes with color, glazing on anything like this, the best thing to do is to wash in straight pigment. Don't mix it with whites. Don't mix it with hardly anything. The blacks, I mean, the Payne's gray is fine because it actually grabs some of that color and it'll put it down with it. But we don't want to mix in any white. So like this color over here that we've mixed in some white with the burnt sienna, we're not going to use that as far as actually laying in some of the color here. We're going to go straight with this, and we're going to thin it down so it's not real thick on top of that. We don't lose the detail we already have in here, but it'll enrichen that color a little bit more. Same thing with the yellow ochre and any other colors that we're throwing in here. Let's get some liquid. Lay the liquid down because we're going to smooth this color over this whole area. Again, just like before, if we go outside our lines when we're blending and smoothing, we're not concerned because we're going to come back in and cut. So let's get some liquid on that whole ring area. Okay, wipe it down a little bit so we don't have any thick spots. Again, just slightly. We don't want to take off the liquid, just want to get an even tone throughout. I'm coming in with a small brush, probably 1/4 inch. I'm going to grab just a little bit of liquid, and I'm going to grab straight color right out of the tube. Nothing mixed with it. None of the white areas that are in here. Just straight liquid. I'm going to go over, get the hair off. We're going to go over everything. That means the white in there and everything. We're going right over the whole deal. You can do this as much as you like. I'm doing this right here with you on this. But if you want to get that even a little bit richer color, I wouldn't do that with this, but say like in here when we throw the bronze in, if you want a little bit dark brown, just wait for the next day and then wash it in like we're doing right now. And the more you add the color to it, the richer in tone that item will be. Okay, I'm going to grab our smoothing brush again, make sure it's clean, and we're just going to even out that tone we just put on. Again, don't worry about the outsides, we're going to cut all of that. And now we have a lot richer color of that gold that's in there. Okay, clean off the brush. Now let's come back in and let's hit that white again. Now we're going to go straight white. Put that shine back in. Just going to go along the edge where the real bright white is. This up here. Go down. Clean our brush off. Grab a little bit more white. Again, you don't want too much on your paintbrush because you don't want a thick blob that when you're smoothing it, it just goes all over the place. We just want a thin line. And again, we're starting from one area and we're working right down to the other, just like that. down. Okay. Now let's grab that bottom part. Again, straight white. Add just a little bit more for more pop. Okay, now let's grab our smoothing brush and we're going to go right along the arch and we're going to blend this back. Now the area that's real bright in here, try not to touch that because we want that kind of as bright as we've laid it down. But toward the end here, we want to blend that down a little bit more. Same thing on this side. It's real light and then a little bit heavier as we go down. Same thing with this down on the bottom here. So grab that. Just like that. Okay, now we're going to come in and we're going to darken down some of this area because we got a good head start on the dark here, but if you look at your photograph, you can see that there's a darker area where it really it picks up the reflection real strong on certain spots. So we're going to come back in and grab that. This is the beauty of Payne's Gray. It'll grab the color you lay down, the yellow ochre, mix it with that Payne's Gray, and actually make it a darker color without having to mix it on our palette. So grab a little Payne's Gray. Not much because, again, this Payne's Gray will darken it down real heavy. You just want to get a little bit on your brush. On a drier side, you don't want it too wet. Just a little bit. Let's see. So let's just grab this. Now make sure we don't get into the white area we just hit. We can go back that way. We're going to cut here, but not there. Now let's just grab this. Just a little bit in here. Like that. More. If you have a real light area where it doesn't look like you're starting to get more grayish tone, you're losing the color, and after you put in your Payne's Gray, like this, the tone that you want, then just come in, a little bit, and then just grab some of your straight yellow ochre. Again, it will mix with the Payne's Gray. It'll be great. That way there you'll darken it down, but it'll be with that color. Now take that same tone and let's hit this top part here. That's a little darker as well. Again, try not to get into the white area. Outside here doesn't matter, but up here it doesn't matter. We don't want to have to redo this again. We can, but we don't want to. So a little more Payne's Gray. Just a little bit more. And if you look at the gold ring that we have, you'll see a little bit of the, almost like a reddish tint, kind of like the red that we put into the handle. So I'm going to come in with just a little bit of my sienna. Again, you don't want to add much. We want it kind of dry, but we want it on the brush. We're going to add some right into like this area here needs it. A bit. And try not to get into that white area. Outside of here, it doesn't matter. Okay. A little bit more. Looks like we have a reddish tone down here. Let's hit that. And let's see right up in this area too. Now we're going to take our smoothing brush. We're going to try to stay away from the white areas. We just want to blend in the darker spots there. If we blend too much, we can come back in with more white, which we probably will. Don't worry about the outside. We'll clean that up when we're done. Right now we just want to grab that Payne's Gray and then burnt sienna and just kind of blend them. Look a little smoothed out, just like metal would be. And before we hit the whites again, let's come in and just grab a little bit of that yellow that we have. Clean our brush off, make sure we have no Payne's Gray or anything on it. Then grab some of that lemon yellow. Again, we're just going to go straight because we're coloring it at this point. We don't want to mix it with the white, we just want straight lemon yellow. Let's get our lemon yellow over here. Just a little bit. Smooth that out. Clean our brush off. Let's come back in. I don't know how your piece is turning out, but mine, it needs a little bit more punch on that white. So I'm going to come in with white, but I'm just going to hit the little sharp edge right where it's really bright and shining. I'm not going to go past this. This is blended out pretty good, but I want that bright part to be a little bit brighter. Again, clean your brush off, grab some white, and try to make it as dry as possible. Get some off your brush. You don't want anything mixed in with paint thinner we just cleaned our brush off with. All of that wettens the brush. We want it dry. So grab some straight paint, just dab at it. You get it kind of dry on your brush. Just a little bit. Right on that highlight area. Do the same on the bottom. Just dry white. We're just going to hit the real bright area. You don't want it too thick because we're still going to smooth this out a little bit. We don't want that white just smearing right over everything. Want enough on there to make a difference. Just about like that should be good. Okay, take our smoothing brush, and again, very lightly because we don't want to take the white off. We just want to get it blended so it's uniform from a real bright down to a nothing. Just very lightly, I mean just very lightly. Just hit it back and forth, just to get the brush strokes. Now take a little bigger brush, and now we're going to cut. And all that is just paint thinner, but you don't want it real wet, otherwise you're going to get a bead on it. You want it damp, a little bit of wet damp, but you don't want it running. And we just go right along the edge. Just cut that right off. Take all the paint that was smeared on the outside. That's the great part about working with wet on dry. You can do all this stuff and not worry about messing up your background. As long as you keep cutting, you don't let it dry before you cut. On the inside. And if you cut too much to take it off, then just take your smoothing brush, smooth it back down, and recut it again. Okay, so we're pretty much done with the ring then. And it's just giving a little bit of pop. We added some more color to it, darken it down, and it enriches that real bright spot. And again, if it's not bright enough, all you have to do is let it dry and come back in tomorrow and do it again. You can lay down more color if you like the color, then just come back in and just hit the white spots and blend that out and cut it, and it'll just keep intensifying and intensifying. You can do the same with the dark. If you want a little bit darker, let it dry, and then come back in with some color and some Payne's gray and darken those darker areas down till you get it to pop just the way that you want it. Okay, so now let's get down to the sword here. Now this area we're going to do pretty much the same thing. We're going to grab some of that gold. We're going to bring some color into that. This here we're going to darken down, and we'll wash in some of the blues that is reflected on that steel. And I think what we do is just to show you a little difference. We'll make this gold, but we'll take this and make this a little bit more bronzy rather than the yellow ochre gold color here. So let's start with this handle first area, and we're going to wash in some more of that gold color, which is kind of like this here. So come back in a little bit of liquid, coat that. Take our towel, make sure we don't have any heavy areas. Liquid, real lightly. And then we're going to come in with our gold, which is straight yellow ochre, not mixed with white or anything. Just yellow ochre. I'm going to hit this area here. And the darker parts you can probably leave, because if we do anything, and we will, we're going to throw in some of the Payne's gray to darken that down. If it's not a rich enough color, then by all means come back in and coat it with your yellow ochre to give it some color. And then when you put the Payne's gray in, it'll mix with that yellow ochre and make the whole thing a darker color rather than just gray. Again, the whites, don't worry about that. We're going to come back and we're going to pop that. Just want to get a little bit more gold color in there. So now that's getting the same gold intensity that our ring has got now. Okay, smooth that out a little bit, just to make it a little more uniform throughout. And don't worry about the edges, we're going to cut all this out anyhow. Now let's come back in and let's put in our bright whites in here. Now on the top part, it's not that bright, it's just got a thin streak. But I'm going to use a smaller brush. Whoops, that's my liner brush. I'm going to use a smaller brush, like I say, it's probably about 1/4 inch. And I'm going to put in the whites in this area here. We're going to blend that back and then we'll start cutting. Pretty much what we did yesterday, we're just laying a second coat on it to intensify it more. Making the whites whiter and the darks darker. Make sure we don't have too much paint on our brush. We don't want to go overboard and have to redo the whole thing with the yellow ochre. Just enough on there. Now if we go over a little bit, don't worry about it, we can cut that. We got messed up over here, don't worry about that. Just one along the edge, just to get that sheen going in it. Come over here, we'll get this part. Now this is pretty bright. So I wouldn't come in too much on the white here. We're going to hit it to lighten it back up a little bit again. Which will pop it. Don't get real bright white in here because we want to smooth that down in certain areas, like right along the leading edge here of the handle. It's a sharper white than that is there. That we're going to come back in and hit that again. We just want to lighten it up a little bit because the whole thing is this nice shine. We're not going to get too white with it. Leading edge is a little whiter, so we're going to get a little bit more there. We're going to come in with our smoothing brush and we're going to smooth all this out. So some of that white we're going to lose, which is fine. We want to get it all uniformly smooth. Then when we need to whiten up, we just come back and hit those little areas. Here. So now take our smoothing brush, make sure it's kind of clean. I use a paper towel, or I have a regular towel here I'm using. Just make sure that it's kind of clean. We don't want to grab any of the other colors that we're using, you know, some of the darker colors that we blended with too, onto the white part. We want it fairly clean. Now we're just going to go along. We're going to make sure that it's nice and smooth. Again, don't worry about it. Just like yesterday, we're going to come back in and cut. Just want to get a smooth shine on it so it looks real. If you want to smooth in one area, it's a little rough there, just stay in that area and it'll eventually just blend right out really nice and smooth for you. You don't have to hit it hard, just be consistent with it and you'll get it nice and smooth. Okay, I think before we cut, I'm going to come in and hit those hard edges again. The real bright whites. Again, we don't want it wet because if we have it wet, we'll start taking off the paint we just laid in. We want it on a drier side, we just want to lay the paint on there. We want it to be on a smoother side. So we just go in with dry paint. Try to get it dry and not a whole lot on there. Just come in with the highlights that we want. A little brighter. Now we're going to come in, we're going to hit the bright parts on here. We smooth that down. Now we want the, whatever's going to be really bright, we just want to hit those areas. Seems to be this leading edge right here. We got a little bit up there. I'll take a smoothing brush and very lightly hit it. We don't want to knock it back like we did before, but just lightly, just to get it on a smooth, continuous glow that we got going on here. Like this part here for me is a little bit rough, so I'm hitting that a little smoother. Okay. Now let's come in and let's cut off all the stuff that we don't want before we get to this bottom part, but they're actually two separate joints. So we just did the top part, we're going to cut on the bottom part, get that off, and then we'll work on that separately. So, a little wider brush, you can use a small one if you're more comfortable. Either one, you just want to get all the excess off. Just cut right along there. Make sure you get all that color off, otherwise it will look a little odd. You want to get all of this off here. That's a great advantage of having this maul stick. Keeps my hand nice and steady, and it keeps it off the painting. I can just guide it right along. Doing the outside first, and then we'll come and we'll cut on the inside of that end as well. That's pretty much it. And I would laid some color in here. I happen to come over and hit my white one over a little bit. So I'm going to have to cut in on that area. Dampish. Here. Let's see. Let's darken in this area down in here just a hair. So we're going to take some of this Payne's Gray. And I want to maintain the gold area, so I'm going to go in with Payne's Gray. And just a little bit of the gold. Not the mixture, but the gold itself. With the Payne's Gray. Straight up. Again, Payne's Gray, gold. Come in here, a little darker down in this corner here. Again, don't worry about going outside your edges, because we're going to cut that. When you're doing this and you're looking at it, look inside here. Don't worry about the outside edges here. The same thing here. It's a little bit darker than we had before. You want to cut in here just to give a little more definition, even though it's not showing on the picture. Define that a little bit more. It's pretty decent. So now let's move down to the sword. Now for the sword, what we want to do is we want to darken this down a little bit more. And we're going to wash in some of the color in here, some more of that blues and a little purplish tint that's here, plus, of course, pop some of the white. But we also have a reflection going on here. Now on the photograph it doesn't show it too much, a little bit. But if you look at your photograph, you'll see that some of this gold is reflected onto the blade of the sword itself. So we're going to do that a little bit. But first, let's get the sword laid in, and then we'll start working on the reflections part. So grab our about a 1/2-inch brush here, and we'll lay back in the dark parts here. Brush. Again, don't get into the area we just did. Just brush the blade itself. So we're going to blaze it here with the lid on. I'm going to get the whole blade. Okay. Come in with a towel. Make sure it's kind of uniform. Not too heavy. Alright, now we're ready to go. Right, now let's take our 1/2-inch brush and lay in some of this Payne's gray right down here on this area. Again, you don't want too much on here, but you do want to tint it back. So you just play with it. If you hit it the first time and it's not light enough, then grab a little bit more. But it's better to add to get it darker rather than hit it too heavy all at once, and then you got to start taking it out. Again, don't worry too much at this point whether you're getting that straight line. I would be more concerned about this straight line because that black on top of the white will dull that down. We want to brighten that back up. So probably, if anything, I would just come straight across with that and then work my way back in. So get that down. I'm going to be adding some color here, so I'm not concerned about the backdrop too much. Here too. Again, we don't worry about that part, but we want to be a little concerned about this. We definitely don't want to get into the gold we just did. So, give it a little bit more Payne's gray. Careful. Bit more Payne's gray in this area. It's probably about like that. It's good. Okay. I'll come in with our blending brush, and we're just going to work on, just like we did yesterday, we're just going to work on one side of the blade first, and we'll come back on this side and work this side. So go back and forth. Again, pretty much go this way with it. If you're having a rough area, you can go that way, but just be careful. You don't want to cross over this too much. If you do, we can take it out, but it's better, it's less work for you if you don't have to cut too much of that off of there. Just want to get it kind of smooth looking. So you want a nice smooth blade. So everything we're throwing down here, the colors and the darkness, should be smooth. Like that. Before we cut, rather than cutting twice here, let's come in and let's throw in some of the colors. Now if you look at your photograph, you can see that it's a bluish tint. It's a little bit of purple, but it's primarily that blue. So what we're looking at is pretty much the ultramarine blue that we've got here. So I'm going to take some of that. Again, I don't want to get too much of it. I want to get some. We may need some of that purple as well. Okay. Let's just lay this down first and see how we're going with this. So now I'm I'm just going to come in. I'm just going to some of that blue that's in there. Just a little bit. Now it's mixing in with this Payne's gray, and it's getting a little darker, which is good because if we look at our photograph, it is on the darker side. So we're fine with that. Maybe a little bit more color. Just to give it some shine, as it were. Okay, up into this area up in here, we're looking at more of this color here. Some of this here. Just giving just a little bit different tinge. I come in with a smoothing brush. I'm going to smooth this down. Make it nice and smooth like a sword would be. That's all we really got going on there. There's a little bit lighter mauve color actually coming up in here. And I would do this first and cut it. And if you want to come back in and lay that darker mauve that's up right on the leading edge over here, just to give it a little more detail, I would do that tomorrow. Right now, let's just cut this edge over here. On the other side of the sword. And if you've gone over any of the areas up here in the thing, we're gonna brighten this up somewhat. But if you've gone over and it's pretty darkened down, then just come back in and cut on that side as well. But if we cut that, remember, we're gonna be taking off some of that liquid on here. So if you have to cut, I'll do it for you. You just come right along the edge and just cut right along that beam. Cut good, I'm going to cut it. Now, then come in with a little bit of liquid. Now, don't get too much on your brush because you can't really get that paper towel or anything and get in there and smooth it without smoothing that paint. So you want some liquid, just a little bit on your brush. Give it some smoothness when you start laying color down on here. It'll be smooth. So now let's come in and let's lighten up this area right here. Now if you look at your photo, it's pretty much light. There's some color shift that's going on. You're seeing a little bit of a pinkish tint, or actually almost, again, a mauve kind of tint that's on there. I would do that tomorrow. So look, it'll come in with the white here, and if you want to, let it dry, and then come in with that mauve color that you're seeing right in that area there, and watch just a little bit of that mauve in certain spots, and then you'll have exactly what you're seeing in front of you. Okay, so let's grab some white. Again, you don't want too much white on your paintbrush, but you want enough to cover. And let's grab this area right here that's supposed to be white. Now again, we're not concerned about anything down here. We're just concerned about the dark area we don't want to get into and the yellow we don't want to get into. follow the picture that you have in front of you there. If it's not exact, it doesn't matter. This is just a shine. It could be shining anywhere. So it's not exact like if you were doing a portrait, you'd have to be right on the money. But this here, we play with it. We get a little creative if we want to actually. Again, just use a little bit at a time. You need to add more, like I need more here. You just come in and add a little bit more. It's a lot better to keep adding than it is to have to take away what you've already laid down. There's a shine here, and it almost looks like it's white, but it's really not. It's a reflection of the gold that's on here. So I'm not going to hit that, and I'll show you. We'll do something later with that. Right, let's just do the blade. The reflection is a different thing, so let's just leave that alone for now. Here, I'm just going to grab a little bit. We're going to blend this back so it'll look natural. Okay, now let's get our smoothing brush. Again, when we're smoothing, we don't want to get into that dark area or the gold area. So we're going to pretty much be going this way with it. You can, if you want, to come down like this, if you need to in certain areas for it to be nice and smooth. We don't want to go back up. So first thing is go with the flow and see what we've got. Pretty good. This needs to be blurred more, so now I am going to come this way with it. And just very lightly. If you press too hard, you start taking off what you've already put down, and you don't want to do that unless you made a mistake. And stay in that area like this here. I want to be a little darker, and I just stay in that area, but it's still light strokes. It's not pressing harder in it. Just light strokes is all you need. Okay, let's tackle this before we get up into this area. So this is going to be the same sort of thing. We're going to have that bluish tint coming back in here. But it does have a little bit of that purplish tint to it as well. So we're going to grab some of our ultramarine blue. We're going to grab some of this violet as well. Just mix it till you have about half and half, I suppose. And again, you don't want much on your brush. And now we're going to come in and we're going to tint this back. Again, like this is really thick, I'm not worried about that because I'll just smooth that down. Smoothing brush, make sure it's clean, and now I'm just going to knock it back. It was way too heavy on there. I just wanted some color in there, not a whole lot. Like that. Now it's starting to look like steel. All right, now for this color here, what we're getting is we're getting the gold shining down onto the silver. And although in the photograph, if you look at it, you can see a little bit of that that goldish color hitting it, but it almost appears that it's more white than it should be. So let's come in and let's hit some of that gold. But because it's like a bright shine that's on there, like you can see in here, what we're going to do, we're going to break the rules of what we're going to do. Okay, instead of coming in with a straight solid color on this, I'm going to come in with some of this gold that's already mixed in with the white. I want it to be a little bit lighter than the blade itself, so it needs some of that white that's in there. It would have been better if that would have been white to begin with, and then we just throw in some of this straight yellow ochre like we did on here, and it give it a really nice rich tone. But it is a reflection, so it will be muted out, so it's okay. I'm going to grab some of that. That might be a little too bright. I'm going to grab some of the medium color. I added just a little bit of white to that, and then I added more white to this part. So I'm going to grab some of this real light ochre, but I'm going to grab some of that in there as well. Just about like that. Now again, you want it on a dry part, because we're going to pretty much go like dry brushing. It's a small area, we can't go here, we can't go here, so getting in with this, with your smoothing brush would be really difficult. So the best way is just to have dry brush and just use your brush to smooth it in. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, now there is a little bit of shadow here, so leave that alone and just follow it in right about like that. We don't want much color in here. We want a lot of that blade to shine through, but we do want it to tint it a little of that color, telling the audience that it is the reflection of this. It's not a ding in the metal. So that's about as much color as I probably want to throw in. So I'm going to clean my brush off. And again, I'm going to use my dry brush on the same principle as smoothing effect. Now I'm going to grab that color. Start blending it. So now it's looking like it's a reflection back on the blade. So we're going to leave that alone. Okay, now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to hit the metal that's in here. Now we originally laid it down the same colors as this, making it gold. But I'm going to take it, I'm going to make it a little bit bronzier, just to change the tone of it. So we're going to make this into a bronze color and a bronze color here, with the gold that we've already laid down. And I'll show you how we do that. So to turn this into the bronze color, we're going to grab a little bit of this raw sienna. Just a little bit. The difference between gold, something that's gold, and a bronze is the bronze is a little bit more red. So we're adding some red. Not real red, because that would change it's the whole concept of it totally different. But the sienna will keep it on a goldish tint, but it will redden it down just a little bit. So grab some of that, clean our brush off. I'm going to use 35. And first, let's go and put some liquid down, because we're going to smooth this out. Let's hit both of them at the same time, get that color on both of them while we have that color on our brush. So I'm going to come in with some little liquid and hit that area. Again, out here doesn't matter what I hit, but I don't want to get into that yellow. Just lay that down. And we'll hit this part up here. Got the whole thing covered. Smooth. Okay, take your towel. Be careful not to hit that yellow. You just want to get any real thick globs off of there. Keeping it uniform, smoothness across the whole thing. Okay, now grab a brush, get some of that sienna. I'm just going to wash some color over the whole thing. Now if it's too heavy with that color and it changed it too much, as it really did kind of a little bit in here, again, we can just come in with our towel and take some of that off, or you can use the smoothing brush and knock some of it back. Either way. See, it turns it into a little more bronzy kind of color. Now we're going to hit the same thing up in here. And you don't want too much on your brush, just a little bit. Mix it in with that liquid that we have on there, and it'll give it a tint that looks more bronze. Make sure you hit the dark spots too. It's got to be the light and the dark. Otherwise your dark will tell everybody, oh, it's a different color than the lighter surface, and it'll look off. Alright, looks fairly decent. Okay, again, let's go and smooth this out. And let's cut around the edge. We're too much about the handle. We're going to come in on that, and actually we're going to come in with some more sienna on that part too, so it doesn't matter. Just don't want it on our background if this was an important thing in the background, and we don't care about the handle at this point. All right, now we're going to pop this in here. But before we go ahead and pop this, let's take a look at the darker side here. And that looks pretty decent actually. According to the photograph, we've got a good dark area here. We just need to pop the whites on this. This here, we're going to need to darken down a little bit more. Let's go from one spot onto the next. So since I'm looking at this, I'm saying that looks fairly decent actually. I'm going to leave it alone. I may come, let's do this on my piece so you can see what I'm doing. And if it works the same with yours, you can do that as well. When I'm looking at this, I'm going, okay, that looks a little more Payne's Gray dark color than a reddish tone like bronze would be. So I'm going to come in with more of the red sienna, burnt sienna. And I don't want it red, I want it kind of dry. And I'm going to hit the areas that are with that Payne's Gray. It's a little on the grayer side, I want it a little bit more red. Just because this was to be a bronze deal, and bronze would be more red than that, isn't there? Just a little bit. Here I'm going to do the same with this, but because that needs to get darkened down, this area in here and some of the spots up here are going to need not only the burnt sienna, but also the Payne's Gray to make that burnt sienna just a little bit darker. So let me come in with this color first and hit certain spots that need it that aren't the real dark areas, which would be pretty much over here. And that spot. And here. if you get too much on there and it's looking a little too red, we can take that off. It's not a problem. Some of this darker area needs to be a little more reddish tint to it, just to show that it's actual bronze rather than red. Okay, so I'm going to knock that back. There's some spots that were just a little too heavy for me. Here. Again, you can just push it right off to the edge over here. We're going to cut that again anyway. So let's get that. It's fairly decent. Looks good. We'll hit. Let's get some of that Payne's gray and some of that raw sienna and start getting the really dark spots in here. So that Payne's gray. And now let's hit this spots. Again, if it's not dark enough, come back in and then hit it a little bit more. You can keep adding and taking away as much as you want. It's almost like sculpting. You're painting, but it's almost like sculpting. You're taking away, putting on, just forming it so that it looks exactly like the way that you want it. This area, I think I'm just going to go with some Payne's gray. Again, this is metal, so metal will have a shine to it. Mentioning that, if you look at it, you notice that it's a little bit darker here than it is back there and there. And that's what we want, because this is a curved piece of metal. And the darker areas, if you look at your photograph, you'll see it's a little bit darker and then it gets lighter and then it gets lighter over here. We're going to actually add some color to that there just to pop it a little bit. So let me grab some more. Smooth that out a little bit. Before I cut that, our lighter areas are pretty much going to be maintained inside, so we're probably not going to need to cut that too much. So what I want to hit here is just the shine on the back side of that metal part, just to pop that a little bit. So I'm going to hit that and we'll blend that down, and then I'm going to cut everything. Clean the brush out. We can go with either like a purplish tone, or we can go with a bluish tone. A blue would pop it more, but it could be a little tricky in trying to blend the blue, because this is on a yellowish base, and the blue and the yellow start turning green. We don't want to get that area, so I'm going to go with the purplish tone. And I'm going to need to lighten that up a little bit in there, so I'm going to go with the white area. And now I'm going against the rules and regulations. You're supposed to use the straight colors. When you're doing reflections, you have to get it lighter, like areas in here, so you do have to use whites with it. So let's just hit this and then right up in here. Make sure you don't have too much on your brush. You want a reflection, you don't want a solid color. So you want some of that background to come through. Just a little bit would be good. I may hit just a little bit on the inside part here too, just to round that out just a hair. Again, very lightly, I don't want much. Just right in this, right where it creases in here. Now that's got to blend in smooth back in here. Just giving a little shine to that edge. Let's cut before it gets dry on us. Now let's come in and start hitting some highlights on there. So, let's see. We gotta hit the highlights on here, we gotta hit the highlights on there. What I'm gonna use, because it's a bronze and it's not gold, will grab white real quick. And once it grabs it, it's hard to let go. I mean, when you get something that's gold, that's shining, I mean, it likes to grab white a lot. Bronze, on the other hand, tends to keep some of its color, even though it will show white. It depends on the lighted area. If it's a really bright white, of course, it'll be light. But for the most part, if it's a reflection, which we're talking about reflections here, it'll maintain some of its color, even though it's a brighter surface. It won't be as white as regular gold will be. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to hit the highlights, but instead of using white, what I'm going to use is this goldish color here. It's not quite as bright white, but it is lighter than what we have down here. And it'll give you that sheen, but of course it won't shine as much as gold does. Gold shines a lot more. So let's come in here and let's get this. That area. just come in and pop a little bit lighter color, oops, on the back side of that bronze as well. But I'm going to go in with a reddish tint on this one. I don't want it to be as bright as this is here. I want it to be a little bit lighter than what's going on there right now. So, yeah, this. Again, I don't put much paint on here, and I'm taking off even less. So I'm using my brush, dry painter. Right now there's no paint on it, and I'm just blending that back and forth, kind of like we would do if we were smoothing with a smoothing brush. But in small areas like this, it's hard to get that brush in there. And there's a little bit, let me just hit just a little bit white on that spot. Or I tell you what, better than that, let me use some of this lemon yellow on there. That'll pop it without making it real bright white. Just a little bit. Still needs a little bit of white. There, that was right the first time. Not much. Tone it down. Okay. Hopefully, from what you're seeing back there, you can see the difference. This is gold, and that's a bronze. It just has that little bit of red, and you handle it a little bit differently, but it's very similar. Now let's come up here and let's highlight some of this part. Grab a little liquid because it's been a while since we hit that area, and I want to make sure it's smooth. And let's go with the same thing. Now with the white, with this light yellow ochre. Smooth that down. decent. Now, if we get on the outside edges, go back in and cut that. Mine looks pretty decent. We'll leave it alone. But if you've smoothed it out and you want a little, and it blurred a little bit there, come back in and cut that to make it nice and sharp that way. Okay, now let's hit the handle. Now the handle again is very easy because we're going pretty much straight sienna on that. We could add a little bit of burnt umber to give it a little more wood tone than red. I don't know, do we want to do that or not? Let's stay with the photograph, so let's keep it on a reddish tone. And the tone that we have in the photograph, if you look at it, that reddish tone that's in there is pretty much straight raw sienna. I mean, that's almost the color itself. So let's come back in and let's get some liquid on there. And we'll redden that down. And we'll see if we can't carve some initials in there as well. Okay, now we want to make sure we don't get into this area we just did or that area. So when you're laying in your liquid, be careful of the edge. Out here it doesn't matter, but along that edge it does, and of course along here it does too. Make sure you have enough liquid on there. We don't want too much, but we do want to coat the whole thing. Okay. Now for brush. Now let's take our cloth, just over lightly, just to make sure we don't have any heavy spots. And it's pretty uniform coating. Okay, now let's take that sienna. And we may want to be liberal with this because that's really light, and in the photograph it's got a really rich color to it. Or if you like it just the way that it is there, because that has a woodish tone to it, leave it as is. Just ignore this part I'm going to be doing. But I'm going to try to make it just like the photograph. So let's throw some of the sienna in. Now go over the white, that's fine. We can come back in, we can take some of that out. We're probably going to shine that up a little bit more anyhow. But we want to get this thing coated really good with the color, if we want to make it like that photograph there. Okay. Now we're going to take our smoothing brush, and again, remember we're smoothing, don't go into this yellow area or that yellow area. We want to probably go more smoothing this way. If you want to, just grab a little bit on the edge there like that. Just want to knock it back, just to get a smooth, even tone. Okay, now that's looking pretty close to what we have up there. If actually it's probably even more of that reddish tone that's in there. But I'm going to leave it like that because I don't want it too red. That's going to look phony. Now let's come in and let's just cut what we've already got. I got some of the red over here and here. Let's cut along that edge. Or I tell you what, before we do that, rather than cutting twice, let's come in. I want to darken the edge up just a little bit more too. Take your smaller brush. You don't want it wet. You want a drier side actually. I'm going to come in with Payne's Gray again. We're going to hit probably more the bottom than the top. You see the top looks fairly good except for back here. So let me hit that first. I like this area here. That looks good, but this looks a little weak. It looks like it's lightened up, and it should be darker actually. So I'm going to come in with the Payne's Gray. Just hit that area back there. Use the brush and try to get a head start on the blending. I don't want to go any more than that. Even that's a little bit heavy, but that's okay. We'll blend that back. Okay, now let's take our Payne's Gray and let's hit the bottom part of this. Darken that area a little bit more too. See, I'm going to put a crease right there, right where that metal was, just to make a separation between the two here. All right, now take our smoothing brush and smooth this back with that, and then we'll cut, and then we'll come in and we'll do some carving. Pretty decent. I just got to cut around the edges. Again, you don't want it too wet. But you want it wet enough that you're going to take away the paint that's here. I would think by now you guys are probably going to be, should be pretty good cutters. The cutting that we've done so far. Okay. Now for the carving, basically all it is you know, you're cutting into the wood, so you have a shadow. Like if it's a line, you have a highlight and then you have a shadow. And it depends on how you're carving that. If this was like a wooden handle that you're carving and elevated off of the wooden handle. In other words, the wooden handle is carved past that and is elevated. Then from the light source, if it's elevated, then you'll get a white line or a white highlight on that top part and on the side if you have it, and then it'll be dark down here and over here. But if it's cut inside the blade, of course you're not going to have a highlight because it's cut in. So then it would just be dark, and the only light part you would have is the bottom part where the light shines through and hits that bottom part. So keep that in mind. Depends on how you want to have that. If you want to have it, carved on top of the handle, and the handle was carved underneath the letters, or if you want the letters carved in the handle, that'll depend on how you put your lighting. We're going to make this as it's carved into the handle. So I'm just going to use my initials. You can put your initials in there or whatever you want. But I'm just going to show you how to highlight and carve that. And I'll tell you something else that I do, and if I was going to do this, I wouldn't do it right at this point because it would mess in the simplicity of carving. So I'm just going to carve, and we're going to put highlights and shadows on my letters, and you can see how to do that. If I was going to actually use this painting with the carving, I would do the same thing I'm going to show you, let it dry, and then on the inside part of the letters, because it's be carved inside, I would come back with the same color or Payne's gray could be good, and just ever so lightly make it a little darker than the outside of the wood. And the reason for that is, if you're using bigger letters, it's going to be a little confusing of like, well, where does the handle stop and the carving begin? Where if you darken down the inside of the letters just a little bit, you still keep the character of the wood, but it's a little bit darker, which it would be because it's inside. It's a little bit darker, and to the eye, for the person that's looking, they would know right away, oh, there's a carving inside. It's just something to keep in mind. But right now, we're just going to carve inside. So, actually, tell you what, let me just go in, let me just make some letters here with that Payne's gray. It's a little harder this way, but that's okay. You guys are worth it. All right, so let's just come in and let's make a D, real simple here. We're not going to go crazy. Too much Payne's gray. This is a perfect example why I said we should do that the other way, because we just coated that with the color. As you can see, with trying to put in some paint and take that out, it's now lighting up the background, and it should be darker, not lighter. So I'm going to have to actually paint that now, make it a little bit darker. That's okay. you can see why I was saying it's a lot easier if you let it dry before you put that darker shade on the inside of it. Now I have to repaint the whole thing, and before I wouldn't have to repaint it. It's just hitting just the highlights. But be that as it may, we knock that back a little bit so that it looks rough. Okay, so as far as carving, like I say, you just have to pay attention to where your light source is. Say if our light source is coming from this direction, the upper left. Okay, the top part of this D, I'm not going to touch because that's where the wood is and it's cut inside and the light source is bouncing over it. I may come in and darken that in a little bit for a shadow, but I'm not going to hit a light source on top of that. Where this part here, the light source would come down and it would catch that bottom edge. So I'm going to come in with a really small brush here, and probably just a small, not a liner brush, but a real small detail brush. And I'm going to hit the, let's do the darker parts first. And again, that will be just Payne's Gray. I may have a little difficulty because we have wet paint down where normally I wouldn't. But I would just take a little Payne's Gray, and just like we darken the areas here, that's how you would do that. Now I have wet paint, it's going to be a little different, but it's still going to use Payne's Gray. You'll see what it's talking about. So I'm just going to hit that top part just a little bit. And now, because this would be open, you would have the, let's hit the side here. Let's see, it's going to come from here to here. Now, our light source is over here, so we got that dark part. And because this would be raised up, this inside of the D, we're going to have a dark part over on top there and on the bottom there. All this carving really is just paying attention to where your light source is and making the highs and lows, the lights and darks accordingly. And that's really all it is to make a decent carving that looks like real carving. Now again, I'm not going to hit here because that's open and the light will be hitting that. That'll be highlighted. Again, just pay attention to your light source as you're painting, and it's really quite easy to get it done correctly. Now we just hit the highlights on them. Oops. Okay, the highlights again, I wouldn't go with white right off the bat because we want to put a white sheen on this area up in here. So I would go with a lighter color, kind of like that color right there, which is, yeah, it's kind of like that, actually a little yellow ochre if you really want to new, but it still has a little bit of the brown, the sienna feel to it. It's not quite bright white because we're not putting in a shine, so per se. We're just putting in a highlight of carved wood. We're going to go with this, and now we go just the opposite. We had the shadow showing up here. Now we're going to come and we're going to hit this. And the same for this side here. And if you wanted to, you could make it more like a, of course you need the room in here, but you could make it more of like a worn out carving by just, instead of having sharp lines, just feather that down a little bit. You take your dry brush and just go back and forth, so it's not a sharp edge, it's more of a beveled edge. And that'll make it look more like it's a knife that was used and the carving is being worn down. So you can play with it that way. And again, if you wanted to put like a crack or something in it, just follow the same thing. Put it in a little bit, like I said, don't paint it in. Just come in with your paint spray at first and just draw in, block in what you want to use. And then when you do your cracks, the same thing. Just watch your light source. This side would be lit up and that side would be darkened down. And then you can make cracks and cuts and whatever you wanted on there, and it'll look real. Okay, now the next part we're going to do is we're going to tackle the column that's here. So let's do that tomorrow. We've spent a lot of time on this, and what we're going to do is I'm going to show you some of the gold treatments on here. There's another picture that I've given you that has a gold base to it, a gold column, kind of like this. The structure is a little bit different, but you get to see how the gold really shines. It hits certain areas and then you get the dark areas like right next to it. That's gold is odd that way. Most things you have, if you have a ball and the light hits here, that's bright, this is dark, and it's a graduation. But with gold, it picks up reflections, and a lot of times you'll have a bright spot and a dark spot right next to it, and then a medium tone on this side. And we'll go into that more in depth on the little bit of gold here. We'll put in some shine. I'll tell you what, let's hit one little area, let's brighten this up so this is nice and dry for tomorrow. And then I can show you how to put in marble and put a little shine on top of that marble as well. So let's finish that up, and let's take real quick here, just grab a 1/2-inch brush. I just want to lighten this area up a little bit, maybe darken the center. This is probably fine where it's at right now. And the gold will pretty much leave as is, because we're going to hand do all of that. So let's come in and grab a little bit of liquid. Let's coat this. Again, just go over it lightly. And now we're going to highlight a little area here. It's kind of like the picture that you have. So we're going to come in and go with a little bit of white and some of that pink, violet that's there. We want to get it light. Okay. We're just going to hit that. Not on the edge here. We want to keep that edge dark. I'm just going to hit this part right here. saturated, a little bit darker in here. We'll do that. Move the brush out. Let's go. And yeah, let's do the beige gray. Not much. We don't want to get it really dark. We just want to take it back a bit. Just about like that. Okay, we'll work a little bit getting toward that lighter area in here. Just to give it, and I think I need a little bit more hands in it. Oops. Yeah, like I said, it's a little too much. Yeah, don't worry about the top and bottom. We're going to cut that. Okay. And now let's take our smoothing brush. I want to keep some of that dark edge over there, so don't get too much on that side, just like that. And then we're going to let this darker spot in. And you want to get a nice smooth surface, not too rough. We're going to put some marble in here, so we'll roughen it up. But if you have a smooth surface, then you don't have to worry about, oh, the surface is rough and I wanted it smooth in that area. If it's all smooth, then you know, okay, I can roughen up what I want and not roughen up what I don't want. So, that's about good. And I'm just gonna come in and cut that bottom gold because we don't want that messed up too much. Nice clean gold to work on tomorrow. So that'll do it for today, and actually, that's pretty much the lesson itself. What I wanted to show you was how to put a shine on things. And you see how easy it is to darken down some areas and put some whites on others, and just shine up anything that's in your painting. If you have a painting that you put a vase or something, and you have it on a table, and you like it, but it's like, oh, it would be nice if it was a really nice shiny vase or something. Now you know how to do it. Just take the painting down, put a little liquid on there, and put the whites on there, and knock it back, cut whatever, if you need to cut it someplace, and you can put a shine on anything. And that's pretty much what this was all about. This next part here, I'm just throwing it in just for fun if you want to see how to do it. It's a great thing for learning how to do gold, and I'll show you a little bit how to do marble. So if you want to do it for the next day, tomorrow, I'll be here and you can watch it. If not, what we've done so far is pretty much the course I wanted to do. So hope to see you tomorrow, and we can finish this off, and I can show you a few little tricks on there.